No puedo dejar de invocar una vez más la protección de la Madre de Dios sobre vuestras personas y vuestro trabajo en estos días. El hecho de que este nuestro encuentro tenga lugar a la presencia espiritual de Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, venerada en México y en todos los otros países como Madre de la Iglesia en América Latina, es para mí un motivo de alegría y una fuente de esperanza. Estrella de la evangelización, sea ella vuestra guía en las reflexiones que haréis y en las decisiones que tomaréis.
Now, what's going on with this Pope? P-O-P-E, this guy that thinks he's a righteous man. He calls himself the Holy Father. Claims he's a priest of the top priest of the planet Earth. Everybody know that, right? So what's going on? He's about to die, or he's already dead, or they lying. They don't want to let us know the truth, but we know that no matter what, he done been punched in his mouth by Apollyon. Y'all know that, right? Y'all know who Apollyon is, right? That's a guy that's over hell. Most people tell you when you in this world, they tell you that Satan is over hell. Satan is going to get punched in his mouth too by Apollyon. Okay, Satan is not the one that's over hell. It's a big black angel over hell. He has muscles and all that. He works out, And he opens up the door to hell. He smiles and punches you right in the mouth. That's how you enter into hell. That's the normal procedures. That's standard. Everybody got that? So this is where the Pope is getting ready to go if he's not already gone there yet. Everybody understand that?
Greetings. As many no doubt know, yesterday, on the 28th of January 2020, the leader of the Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ, known as Tazadaqyah, was sentenced to prison. Now, undoubtedly, some from rival Israelite groups, as well as some former members of Tazadaqyah's church, and also some who are generally interested in Israelite polemics, will rejoice, will celebrate at his apparent downfall. Me personally, I question the prudence of that. I don't think we should rejoice at the fall of any man. Nonetheless, I opened this video with footage of Tazadaqyah sort of gleefully celebrating the passing of Pope John Paul II and fantasizing about Apollyon, the angel mentioned in Revelation 9, punching the Pope in the mouth. And I also opened with a clip of that same Pope, Pope John Paul II, invoking or requesting the protection of the Virgin Mary upon the believers during a visit to the Americas, specifically Mexico, back in 1979, in fact, on the same date, the 28th of January. In other words, the sentence that he received yesterday came 41 years to the day of that same date that the Pope gave the speech, a clip of which appears at the beginning of this video.
Una coincidencia.
Las coincidencias no existen. Todos estamos en las manos de Dios.
With that in mind, I'd like to make this brief video from somewhat of a Catholic perspective. Now, as I alluded to, there will be others who are likely to make much more hostile videos towards Tazadaqyah and his time at the top of the Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ. That would include rival Israelite groups, other Christians, and especially former members of his church who are probably in the best position to talk about the more negative aspects of his leadership. There will be some disagreement, some negativity in this video, but I'm going to try to rein it in somewhat. The Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ, like all Israelite groups, had bitter disagreements with the Roman Catholic Church and therefore polemicized against it quite a bit. Therefore, a Catholic commentary on the ICGJC, on the Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ, on Tazadaqyah's church, will naturally have some disagreement embedded within it, but I'm going to attempt to be fair and objective in this brief video. On an interesting note, I did correspond with some members of the ICGJC more than a decade ago, nearly a decade and a half ago, And in fact, some of the members of the church that I interacted with at that time were quite intelligent. They impressed me with their intelligence. In fact, one person who was a member of the group at that time, I'm under the impression he's no longer a member, struck me and continues to strike me as probably the most brilliant Israelite I've ever encountered. So that is to say, as a credit to the ICGJC, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant Israelites I've ever encountered was a member of Tazadaqyah's church. I actually ran into that gentleman in Manhattan years later and told him that he was, in my opinion, the most brilliant Israelite I had ever encountered. And it was not part of any attempt to flatter him. It was just my honest impression, which I was sharing. Anyway, getting back to the church, unfortunately, however, I was not a Catholic at that time. And by that I mean the time period in which I was corresponding with members of the ICGJC more than a decade ago. And so ironically, even though I did correspond with some members of the group years ago, I never got to engage them from a Catholic perspective. I converted to Catholicism I embraced the Christian faith in 2007 in a Catholic worldview shortly thereafter. And the discussions with the ICGJC members were shut down around the time of the Two Gods controversy, which I believe was around 2006. And some other Israelite groups noticed when the ICGJC suddenly put a sort of embargo on further discussions.
That's why Abu came up against us, and Abu, he gave up, man. He gave up the fight. Because I used to look after him. Now, he used to get on Comfy, right? And Comfy used to run and hide from him.
Therefore, because I never discussed doctrine with members of the ICGJC from a Catholic perspective, I would like to take a brief moment now to give a brief idea what a Catholic response to the ICGJC might look like. Now, I hope members of the ICGJC are not offended by this. I'm not trying to be overly polemical. I hope they understand that they've been quite polemical against Catholicism for quite some time, and therefore they should not be surprised if there are rare occasions when Catholics respond. One easy response from a Catholic could be, your church used to deny the virgin birth, but later accepted that doctrine and also accepted the perpetual virginity of the Mother of God, tacitly admitting that our church was correct all along. So too, a Catholic might say, your church used to deny that hell is real, but you later came to believe that hell is real, tacitly admitting that our church was correct all along. And you saw earlier in this video, there was the short clip of Tazadaqyah predicting that Pope John Paul II would go to hell and be, as he put it, punched in the mouth by the angel Apollyon, mentioned in Revelation 9. A Catholic might also offer the similar objection along these lines. Your church used to deny Christ as God, and while your position is still Arian, it has tacitly moved a lot closer to the church's position. So even here, while there are still disagreements between the ICGJC and the Catholic Church on Christology and on theology, you've nonetheless moved a bit closer to the Catholic position. You've somewhat again tacitly admitted that the Catholic position was at least partially correct, more correct than you previously used to admit. The common thread running through those three preliminary objections is that, in short, in polemics between the ICGJC and the Catholic Church, from our vantage point, it seems like your church, like the ICGJC, has slowly been catching up to our church. That is to say, over time, you've slowly admitted that we were right on a number of doctrines, and that leaves us to wonder, what other points that we currently disagree on will you eventually come around to agreeing with us on? I have no idea if I'll ever get to discuss those topics with members of the ICGJC, but at this point in this brief video, I'd like to take a step away from the polemics and look at those issues from a different perspective. While, as I noted, other critics of Tazadaqyah and the ICGJC will probably have much more hostile, negative things to say about the church, here I'd like to look at it from a different perspective, and that is to say that at the very least, seeing that Tazadaqyah took the primary One West group in that direction, getting them to be a little bit more cognizant of Christ's divinity, to accept the existence of hell, to accept the virgin birth and even the perpetual virginity of Mary, shows that in the history of the Israelite spectrum, or at least the One West spectrum, he's a very interesting and creative figure. Personally, I think that some of the elements within his breakdowns in defense of the virgin birth were quite interesting and have value to mainstream Christians who would like to discuss the virgin birth with One West Israelites who continue to deny it. And so, noting that positive side of Tazadaqyah, this raises some questions regarding what's going to happen with him, what's going to happen with his leadership of the church, and what's going to happen to the church itself vis-a-vis those doctrines. For example, he may retain leadership of the church during the year and a half that he's going to unfortunately spend in prison. However, it's also possible that with him in prison there may be a power struggle and others may seize control of the church. I don't know if that's going to happen. However, if he does lose control of the church, then what happens to it doctrinally? How many people will retain the doctrines that he introduced, and how many will jettison them? There may be a schism, there may be just a continuation of those doctrines, or there may be an utter rejection of some of those doctrines. And therefore, it's an interesting question as to where does the church go now, depending on whether or not Tazadaqyah is able to maintain control of the church. Another group which has followed a similar path to the ICGJC is Israel United in Christ, Nathaniel's group, or now he's known as Nathaniel's group, Israel United in Christ. And it's followed a similar path in terms of the organization, in terms of the uniformity, in terms of the discipline. In fact, I think some would say that the IUIC comes off as a more disciplined group than the ICGJC. The IUIC has even gone down a similar path Christologically, and I covered that in a previous video titled ICGJC, IUIC, and Devolving One West Christology. Comparing IUIC and the ICGJC is also interesting because it seems that IUIC has replaced the ICGJC as the largest Israelite group, or at least the largest One West Israelite group. Interestingly, at a previous court appearance, Tazadaqyah got into an argument with a couple of former members of his church, and even they shared their impression that IUIC is now the largest One West group, even if they couldn't remember the precise name.
You wasn't deceived.
But your nation's
You're
not
just
strong.
a
You got what?
disgruntled-
1,500 strong.
No, it's 5,000 strong.
1,500 strong.
It's
son.
5,000.
And you're supposed to be the guy
It's
for 18
5,000.
years. What have you done
It's
in this time
5,000.
frame?
What?
5,000.
What have you done?
That includes
What
all the
have you done?
kids and all the unborn kids, the 8 kids he's fed. That's what you included?
Let me ask you
I'm talking about
Roman.
raping
Let me
men.
ask you a question.
Let's get back to the prophet.
Let me ask you a
You
question.
came up
Let
with
me
a
ask you a
Roman
question.
Catholic
You said,
no
let me ask you a
problem, no
question.
problem.
What Israelite group is larger than us right now?
Oh my
That's
God.
it.
What? What's that do with the purple and that? With the purple, they way bigger than you.
Them niggas with the
I don't
purple.
follow them, but they be all over there.
And
You know what I'm
how
talking
many
about.
members is-
You know, I don't
Let's
take
prove
time.
it.
I don't.
Let's prove it.
Listen.
Let's prove it.
I don't want to go into that,
thing
but I
is-
know.
And so I think that's the most interesting question. Where does the ICGJC go from here? Now, it should be noted that we're talking about the primary One West group, in a sense, the original One West group. I know that rival One West splinter groups wish to deny that based on the doctrinal changes which have happened within the church, but honestly, most of the One West splinter groups have gone through major doctrinal changes as well. This is the primary group, and it was once the largest group. However, as was just noted, we see that it seems to be fading in terms of numbers, and now there's a question of what happens to its leadership and what happens to the doctrines that it got it right, whether partially or wholly correct. We'll see. Time will tell, and I think this is quite an interesting subject, and so I may return to it in future videos. Regarding Tazadaqyah, I know this video was somewhat polemical, and I know there's quite a lot of people that are piling on to him at this time when he seems to be falling. I think the most appropriate thing to say is that the man is not outside of God's mercy, and therefore it's not a bad idea to pray for this man and to wish him well, both spiritually and physically, and hope that he makes a correct turn, and hopes that while this is an unfortunate period of his life that he's entering into, hopefully he can take a more positive turn. On that note, I'll close here, and as always, I look forward to the comments of others. God bless.